And we're very glad that here with us is the founder of iTETA Consulting, and we're having him on stage, obviously with a nice, dynamic, energetic applause to give him some extra energy, Nikola Šerbedžija.
Thanks. I see you learning fast, so in the meantime you learn my name.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry for trouble. Okay, so thank you for giving such a nice introduction. Now I try to stand to it. And in a summary, I will talk about computing principles that are inspired by the social science and also by psychology. So I think for years now, being involved in developing pervasive systems and realizing that we are getting humans and also the whole society into the processing loop, I realized that there is one aspect missing, that actually the man is missing in all these design issues. And I just want to somehow reiterate this necessity to you and maybe try to motivate you that in future, in your work, you try to involve other disciplines and have a sense for the humanity principles and try to install them into your technical system. So I'll first talk what motivates me, how I come to all this, and then I describe my approach called social by design, by giving some social science concepts. So there is one critical social scientist may then criticize me that I'm misinterpreting some of the difficult social science principles, but you'll see, I'll try to confront you with some of these issues, which are really not so, sometimes not so easy as technical things. And then I put in front of you some of the research challenges and give you some examples of what I really think. So it's not so much that I will show you exactly how you should install social principles into your system. I'll make a lot of questions and I'll give less answers than I'm making questions. So, but I think that's a good way to somehow also try to reinforce the communication and simply set this research direction. So obviously we are now using all these technical systems, we are becoming very much dependent on them. And then you see that really when we develop technical systems, we are not aware of actually the impacts that it will have on us. So now we are experiencing nowadays that things are really changing and people are sometimes even confused because we are for so many years, centuries, people somehow are concerned about possessions, about physical existence, about reasoning. And nowadays we see that actually access right is sometimes more important than a possession. You don't need to possess things, or even physical existence can be somehow substituted by virtual presence. So there are things which are really, even frightening. Sometimes you think, why should I learn something? Why should I reason about things? It's the internet there. I'll get information, and then using all these statistical algorithms. Well, they're great. I got a lot of useful things about this. So those are the issues which are now questioning, especially humanities. And then also there are a lot of warnings, like digital dementia is here, or kids are addicted to internet, and our privacy is completely lost, actually. We shouldn't talk much more about privacy. There is no privacy, at least not for digital bones. And even a lot of people talk about gamification because actually at one side, I think always we are so intelligent that it's hard to make a more intelligent system. But if we become a bit less intelligent, it will be easier. And sometimes being exposed to technology makes you a little bit less intelligent. So we should be careful about this. Okay, so when you look to technology trends, I just put here major things which are now, we call them all together digital transformation, and I won't now repeat them, you can just see them on the screen. And those are the issues that we are all working around. And most of the talks would fall in some of these categories because, you know, you are really online. But I want just to put a focus on a part of this system that really takes humans and put them into the processing loop so that humans become really a subject of computing. And you have this on the left-hand side. You have a typical human control system where you have some sensors, you acquire some data, maybe from the brain by EEG of fNARS and so on. You do some signal processing, you interpret this, you somehow try to deduce some cognitive or emotional state of the person, and then you do some actuation. You simply change environment or do something, and then you, in that way, you put a man in the loop. And actually, this left part of the picture with this examples of artificial hand or maybe controlling the way how the wheelchair would go is actually very useful. So I would say even this is the most useful achievements of the modern technology when they help especially disabled people to somehow overcome some of their disabilities. So I'm proud of this part. But there are other issues as well. So if you look how the people or social groups are coming into the focus of computing, then we may question how useful and how good it is. Because you have to keep in mind, all control systems, it is from the time we start making control systems, have certain goal under which they operate. So they are goal-oriented systems. And especially if we talk about social networks or Internet of Things that surrounds us nowadays, smart environments, there's a lot of processing there, but also it affects social groups and it affects people. And you always have to think, what is the goal of these systems? Why are they working as they work? And I mean, just simply by definition, you know, if you see most of the social networks are developed by commercial companies, and they do have their business plans. And which is normal, of course. I'm not criticizing this, but we should only be aware of this. And my feeling is that there is no social science concepts in these social networks, and that there is a need to have a stronger, to involve the humanities much stronger into the development loop. So if you look to what is really going on, then you can notice a number of paradoxes that is nowadays present. And it's really amazing almost that, you know, it's like World Wide Web and Internet, they're typically, you know, like a distributed system. It's just, you know, if you want to say something is distributed, you think about a web. But actually nowadays, we are seeing that 99% of the time you are on the Internet. Actually, you are either on Facebook or on Google, which are almost centralized systems. So this distribution is actually getting centralized. And also, if you look to the artificial intelligence and the great predictive analytics results, and some of you are working in this also with a lot of success, and actually it's trying to somehow substitute natural intelligence. But in effect, using all these statistical algorithms, be it in neural networks or be it some kind of deep learning, basically, you're sometimes getting very good results, but you don't have any ideas about causalities, why it is so. And what is it, we don't actually get any pluses from this in terms of knowledge. So this is, again, a paradox that we can see. In autonomous systems, you know, by definition, autonomous is someone who can somehow function without human help. And autonomous systems are now great, and I was working a lot in this area, but basically, it restricts our own autonomy. As soon as you start using autonomous systems, you're losing your own autonomy, and those are actually conflicts that you may have. Social platforms are really stealing our privacy and individuality. I already mentioned this about the difference between information and the knowledge. So nowadays, as we all look for information, we are really sacrificing our knowledge. And as I said, getting sometimes even dummier than we should be. And digital transformation is actually being so popular, and everyone is working in this direction, but it's a bit suppressing our intuition, our curiosity, our creativity, and so on. So last but not least, the most benefit we should get from the computers is due to the speed to gain actually our own time so that we can do something else. But basically, if you look to our kids or whoever, I mean, are we gaining time by using social networks, or is it eating our time? So that's the question that you should all be asking yourself. So why social by design? I steal the idea of privacy by design, which is the concept developed by Anne Kowikian, and she was, I think, on this conference a couple of years ago presenting this concept. Now the concept is already something like more than 5 years old. But basically what it means is that you take privacy and you somehow start to think about it, install it in the complete design cycle. So in all design phases, you should take care of this. So that's the similar thing I want to do with some of the concepts from the humanities. So when we talk about systems that deal with the people, with the social groups, or with humans, we have to understand the human being as it is. So this is the cover page from the Technology and Society, IEEE magazine, when they put some ethical framework into the process of human augmentation, because sometimes when we try to improve ourselves by technology, we are forgetting that we are ruining our natural inherent processes. So we have to be very careful about this. So it would be good to read the manual for optimal health and well-being, which is really what we are by nature, so to say. And by social by design, I intend to take some social science principles which are sound and well accepted in the social science community. I want to introduce conviviality. I'll take some behavior analysis so that we need psychology there as well. I will invest a bit of honest signals and social physics, so including all this into the design process. So this is how you made a social by design system. So you have to, from the design to development to the testing and evaluation, you have to see how well you treat all these concepts. So when you involve humanity into the development loop, actually you are bringing the multidisciplinary research. And this is sometimes very interesting, sometimes it's difficult. You know, sometimes you have to take others' objectives and leave yours. I mean, it needs a common vocabulary. It needs a common work, and it's not always easy. I was working with psychologists, with social scientists, and I usually come across the people that simply, at the beginning, hate to work with technical people. I don't know whether we are aware what the people think about us. I mean, like, you know, we are too technical, or we simply do not take into account many other aspects of this wonderful life. And sometimes we also think about them, what they are talking about, who cares about this? This is not efficient, this is not so important. So you need to somehow find a common vocabulary to start to discover the joy of working with people who think differently. And only then you start learning, really. You get a major gain of this. So I would really somehow try to encourage you to come into this multidisciplinary endeavor. And also there are differences between technical and social behavior, because in technical systems, you know, you have usually, especially in this control system that, as I said, works towards a certain goal, you have the first direct and pragmatic impact which is the utilization of what you're doing. So you want your system to be useful. You don't think about consequences. You just want it to do its work without thinking what is beyond this. And then there is an indirect and conceptual impact where by some operation, especially if it is well accepted and everyday activity, I mean, this very activity would have a kind of impact, will induce changes to the environment. And then you have to somehow consider this as well. You cannot ignore these changes which are somehow which are happening. So at one side, when we talk about certain goal, usually those goals are commercial in nowadays systems. And when we think about impact on the environment, I mean, actually no one cares about it. So this is actually my point, where we should really think about these induced changes, not maybe always willingly, not with a purpose, sometimes. Simply, many systems ignore this. And that makes really, to my concern, a lot of damage to our society and to the environment, because, I mean, do operational goals really match interests of the affected people? For example, if you're a user of the Facebook, does Facebook really answer to all your needs? Or they're just leading you according to their goals and interests, and you are fascinating to be there, but what are the consequences of this? Okay, so just let's shortly talk about cross-discipline work, because it's something really, in the last almost 10 years, I've been really heavily involved to work with people from the other disciplines, and it was a time when I learned the most, I would say, in my life. So working in ICT is easy, for us, I mean. We are on the same level, we understand each other, we just start something and you know what I want to say. And even if we would have maybe different definitions, but we more or less know what it means. When I put all these difficult terms here, we more or less know what it means. Maybe not in every word, but in general, we understand each other. But when you talk with humanities, I mean, especially for us, but even for them, it's a slippery terrain. Because, you know, what do you mean by collective? And you got maybe, if you have 10 social scientists, you get 10 definitions. And they cannot agree. They even argue about this. But for them, it's very important. They really should be, there should be agreement. So you start thinking, you start asking, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And at the end, they ask you what means, actually. So it's a bit philosophical. So but you have to have, first of all, you have to have patience for this. And then, we are thinking arrogantly, but then you realize it's really not irrelevant. I mean, those are important things. So you can see things from different perspectives, and there are different meanings. So when we think in biology, collective would mean different things. There are a lot of animals that act collectively, and it's fascinating for us, and we are hardly able to imitate this in technology, though we are talking about non-intelligent species. So in Wikipedia, you see that collective behavior have some kind of, you know, aggregating together, and there is the system should be seen as a whole, and there are collective decisions. So there are different aspects of this collectivity that you have to take into account. There is collective group dynamics in this collective. So there are a lot of different things, and technology, we just take one of them and say we made a system and we claim to be, you know, swarm robotics or whatever. There's only small aspects of this swarm behavior developed there, but still we are even sometimes not aware what these things really mean. So that's why we have to even think what means, but also to discuss it with different disciplines and from the people with different education. So we also got a collective intelligence, you know, and there are, again, different aspects of how, what collective means. Or you can see in the collective behavior, you have these terms like crowd or public or mass. So in the crowd, usually express the common emotion. So you don't think, but it's in sport you see that. You know, we have it 2 days ago in Wimbledon when one guy was playing against the opponent and the whole audience because crowd was against him, and then he won. Luckily, we came from the same town, that's why I'm mentioning him. And then in the public, when you have, actually, we usually think we understand this, but when you discuss something in public, that means you take a certain concrete issue and put it really wide, but it's a single issue if you want to talk about in the public discussion. And then you also see the term of a mass is actually the mass media is actually then the media when you really use the means to spread information really to the wide audience. That's how you make a mass media. So I just want to give you some examples of how you can see different aspects of the same concept. And this collective systems are being investigated, and since really a long time. And there's even a branch of computational sociology that somehow took care about this. And here is a big graph of a lot of research from early days of computing, but it never brought anything, actually. No one is using it. You don't know about it. So then it started again to provoke interest in some maybe 10 years ago or something when we start heavily using social networks and e-commerce systems. And now with disruptive technology, it's getting a little bit more present, but as I said, there is nothing much done in this in our field. So now it was a long introduction. Now I want to give you some of the real difficult concepts from the sociology. And I selected the Bourdieu field theory, and Bourdieu is a French sociologist who is one of the biggest names in sociology. And he had this so-called field theory, where he defined the field as a social space. And the people are acting within this field, taking some roles and making relationship. And as the people act in the field, they gain a certain capital with these fields, and it makes them, being familiar with the field and developing some dispositions how to behave in the field, and creating a set of acting rules, which is actually the habitus. It's another major concept that he introduces. And for example, and it's a very tricky issue because, it's really politically tricky now to talk about it sometimes. But those are the everyday problems, and those are the efforts to explain how the society functions. So, for example, you have gender and race issues. And there are certain societies with a built-in natural order, so to say, and then you can see that they are different. So when you enter some society, you have to learn what are the rules and orders there and to try to actually adapt your acting for this society, for this field. And maybe the best politically neutral example would be that you come to this conference. So now you are completely new to the conferences. And then you have to see how to behave. You try to be polite. You try to get to see what is going on. Who is the speaker? What the audience should do? Do I applaud anytime someone said something? Or should I wait to the end? I mean, you have to learn the rules. So this is what is building a habitus. So again, a field is a structure, autonomous domain. It could be art, education, politics, sport. And the habitus is, again, a system of disposition. So, and it is very dynamic thing. So, if you are in the sport, it's completely different whether you are very experienced and excellent sportist, a star, or just a beginner. I mean, you see the great difference in behavior. And we could use technology to discover that. And this kind of acting within these social fields are really following certain patterns, so we can be very sure that things function, as the sociologists are really taking this theory as one of the greatest theory in social science. So there is also a kind of power relation that guides human behavior, and then in each field there are some field forces, and habitus as a mental and cognitive system of structures can also change in the process. So normally you somehow come to the field and you should be coherent with all the rules within the field. So you can say, I feel like a fish in the water. That's a good metaphor. Because, you know, I know everything, I'm fine here. Or you can feel like a fish out of water, you know. If someone came here and had no idea how to behave here, but would like to get some certain social acceptance, it's a problem. And then you see one of the major, characteristics are those so-called symbolic violence, which actually are those with a high capital, with high social capital, are using within a field. So that, for example, on our conference, the session chair can say, okay, now stop talking, there has to be another one, and he will just, do whatever he wants, and he feels comfortable. And the one who comes first time in the conference would be silent, would wait to the, and then you can see that this kind of symbolic violence is a dominant behavior in the field, and the more capital you gain, the more social power you got, and then maybe you're experiencing or exercising the social violence as well. But this is how we do actually behave in the society. You have it in families, you have it at work, you have it in sport, you have it in politics, or in the economical sphere. So it really explains how the society functions. And the social capitals have various elements. So here are the examples of them. And then, of course, we all are very keen to gain this social capital when we are acting within some social field. So, and it's a very active system. It's not something that is simply given. So if you see the social behavior on the scale, on the vertical scale, and then we take the habitus as a set of dispositions that somehow determine our behavior, and then there are a lot of transformation, primitive classification, and deep structures. For example, you can be subtle or clumsy, you can be skillful or laborious, you can be lively or slow, or light or heavy, and then if you see different aspects like unique, novel, different, or you're just ordinary, routine, and then you actually can dominate in the field, or you will be dominated. And this is actually what is going on in our society. For this, the good thing is that the habitus changes. It's not something which is given and fixed. And as you act in the society, you may adapt, you may develop your social capital, and then you may change your habitus. And that's why it's so nice description of our society. So what was Bourdieu also hated for with this actually brutal description, then he was also describing the social classes. So if you see, if your cultural capital is low, if your economic capital is low, then you usually eat fast food and you behave in a certain way. You are simply pushed into the edge of the society, and then you belong to a lower class. And then if you are a bit better with economical capital and also a bit more educated, then you can afford yourself a bit more, now describing a middle class, or simply when you are very high with your economic capital and the cultural capital, then you are the class for yourself. So I'll try to put some of this concept into the technical system. And one of the things that we can use is that just analyzing behavior, you can deduce a lot of this habitus characteristics. Now, the second concept I want to introduce shortly now is the conviviality. And there are different aspects of it again. And I would just try to skip it and just try to say what we try to do is to make the technology convivial. And convivial in terms, and there is a philosopher, Ivan Illich from Austria, that actually just put the last sentence that he wants the technology to serve the people, That's the message. And nowadays we can also see that I'm not so sure whether now technology is serving people or whether we are being dictating and running by technology. So it should be more convivial. And there's some in social books, there are a lot of definitions. And actually, it's a positive, that's what I want to say. It's a very positive aspect that we try to gain. And then I will inspect the human behavior, which is actually can be seen as a signaling game. And then the signaler, you always measure or weights the benefits of accurately presenting his goal, or maybe not showing what intentions correctly. And the signal receiver always measure the benefits of correctly understanding or misinterpreting this. So there's a lot of games in this, and ICT can assist. I mean, we have a system that can easily help you recognize a lot of these signals that we are putting into our communication. Now I have to put in the second gear, so there are some kind of honest signals are honest because they come innately. You can't control them. They are really something which is simply there. And now I just want to have these two books and say that honest signals are now treated by technology by analyzing it's so-called physiological or psychological computing, where you can simply measure some of the physiology processes in the human bodies and then interpret cognitive or emotional state. And also, there is a kind of a social physics. If you measure certain signals, there's a whole book about it, you can for sure extract a lot of regularities in the society. And I want to use all these findings to make the system that can assist people. Not that we can discover what the other thing is, but really assist people in the social circumstances and the social behavior. So this is my main research challenge. And now, just shortly, I show you the system we are now developing. Is that we have a device called Soulmate, and then it should instruct and help persons to understand social context and to, according to the psychological situation, assist people in their behavior. And also, as we have now smart cities, smart everything, now I want to somehow put a prototype of a smart environment which can also sense the field characteristics, and in the Bourdieu terms, and then help really individuals to somehow go through it, to feel like a fish in the water, not a fish out of water. And the fundamental difference of the system is simply, if you are wearing the Google glasses and you say, Google, I'm hungry, you got some tips where to go to eat, but mostly you got the restaurants which pay to Google to be advertised. And if you ask our system and say, since I'm hungry, then you should get the direction to the place where you have the food you like, you meet the people similar to you, and maybe they play the music that you like. So this is what we are trying to do now with all these tools and prototyping them. And let me just say there are some open questions here still that we have: how to map and model habitus, and how to model social, economic, cultural capital. So you have to find the ways, and you can deduce a lot from the human behavior if you follow, like those who are with a big social capital. You follow their behavior, you can actually extract a lot of information from the way they behave. So it's not only that you are monitoring the person, you have to monitor the environment, you have to know the context of the behavior, and then you can deduce much more with your system. So we had, in our case study, we have the system called Urban Soup. There is a reference, you can read more about this. And we use social science and information technology together with urban planning to develop a platform that should somehow help people maintain their authentic features, and that they should somehow lead the tourist to the authentic values of some city, not really the typical touristic issue. So we are fighting against touristification with this system, and then there is a structure of the system. That's how it looks like. So I hope your future work will be more convivial, and it will reflect your habitus. Thank you.